Good day, viewers. Welcome to a new edition of 30 Minutes, the interactive program of Trust Television with me, Manir Dan Ali. Our guest today is a former journalist and, shall I say, recently retired chief executive of the NEITI, that is the Nigerian Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, the body that kind of tries to understand all the details of what is going on in the extractive industry, whether oil or minerals and others. I'm talking about Mr. Waziri Adio. Waziri Adio, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
I know you've been here before.
Yes.
And I see that you also write a column for one of the newspapers, and you've been touching on something of a lot of interest. I mean, not many people spend time to study the so-called super agencies, that is some of the government institutions that are super maybe by virtue of the work they do, or also by virtue of the humongous amount of money they collect and also spend. Yeah. So can you shed light on these super agencies and the details of your finding, especially as it impacts on other areas where maybe they are just crying for survival?
Okay, thank you very much again. I've done a two-part essay for this day on the agencies I call super agencies, or agencies that you can call governments within government. And they're in the minority. If you look at it, we have more than about 1,000 agencies, right? These agencies, are not even up to 100, so they are not even up to 10% of the government agencies that we have. But the amount of resources at their disposal, like you said, is humongous. And to whom much is given, much is desired. And we need to be looking at, so how are they getting the kind of resources and how are they spending these resources, especially at a time when two things are happening, right? We need all the resources, all the money we can get. Two, we need to apply the little that we have in a very prudent way. So these agencies are in three categories, right? They get these resources, this amount of money because of the kind of categories that they fall into. The first one are agencies that collect revenues on behalf of the Federation.
This is maybe like the Federal Inland Revenue Service?
Yes, Federal Inland Revenue Service, Nigeria Customs Service, and NUPRC, Nigeria Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, right? So they collect what they call cost of collection. Customs collect 7% on import duties, levies, and others.
Are you saying that this cost of collection, this is money they retain themselves to spend as they wish? Okay.
So first, custom collects 4% cost of collection. FRS collects 4% cost of collection. Custom collects 7%. NUPRC collects 4%. Right. So the idea is that when you undertake an assignment, on behalf of somebody, there will be some cost associated with that. So so they are allowed to collect some kind of commission. So they are more like commissioned agents for the Federation.
But why are they getting this commission? Because I thought they're employees of the federal government. They are getting salaries from the federal government. Why this extra?
Yeah, the idea is this: they are seen as special agencies that play some very important roles. Take FRS, for example. You need them to collect the taxes, right?
But you pay them to collect them?
Yes, you need them to collect the taxes, so you want to give them the incentive to bring in as much taxes as possible, right? So you say, okay, you take a cut of whatever you bring in. Right? It's like you say, okay, collect this on my behalf, but you also have an incentive that the more you collect, the more money you also get, right? And also, the more you collect, the more the effort you also put in. So the idea is to ensure that, one, they have the resources to be able to carry out the assignments I've given to them. Two, they have the incentive to do that. Three, they also have regular, predictable funding that will allow them to be able to do their job very well. So the first category, are agencies that collect what you call cost of collection, right? That's the first one. The second one are agencies.
And out of this, sorry to interject, out of this, we are talking of billions of naira.
Yes,
not in millions.
I'll come I'll come to that shortly. So you have that first category, and those three organizations. You can also throw in NNPC into that, because they also carry out some.
NNPC is privatized.
It's not privatized. It's a government company. It's a government-owned company. It's owned by two entities, Ministry of Petroleum Incorporated, Ministry of Finance Incorporated, right? So it's still owned by government, but it's just running like a company. Though, there's still some gray areas around that. But, so you have these organizations that collect, and to answer your question directly about the quantum of money that they collect, in the report, in the budget of the government-owned enterprises released by the Budget Office, released for the first time in our history. They released 282-page document, and it has the breakdown of the budget for each of these agencies, right? Customs will spend 452 billion naira in 2024.
452 billion
naira.
That sounds like more money than Nasarawa and Yobe State combined together for the whole year.
Absolutely. So you have some of these agencies that will have money at their disposal, much more than the revenues or the budget of even some states. Ekiti State, for example, is 159 billion, right? And one government agency, 452 billion. Actually, the money they are going to generate is going to be 459 billion. Out of that, they're going to spend 452 billion. They're going to spend 98% of the money they are going to receive. FRS.
Are there any guidelines for spending such monies?
It varies, between, among
or you
organizations.
Can spend it on whatever you.
I'll come back to that a little bit. Yeah. But customs, 452 billion naira. FRS, 356 billion. They are going to get 356 billion, and they are going to spend the entire 356 billion. Nothing less, nothing,
Has it always been like this huge quantity of money? Because I thought I saw somewhere that maybe in the last just 3 years, it is not up to a third of this amount. That there's a big jump in the
more money you collect, the more you retain, because we give them a fixed percentage, which is part of the problem. But so that we'll get to this in a very structured way. The first set is that you have all these agencies that collect cost of collection. You have some agencies that you give a portion of some revenue handles. You say, oh, these agencies play some important role. There are some revenues that we're going to be generating. There's a portion of that we're going to give to them, or either a portion or whole. For example, you have the education tax fund, 2% education tax fund. It goes to TED fund, right? You have 1% of federal government allocation from the federation account. It goes to NASENI, right? So you have some agencies like that just say, okay, you have 1% education tax, information technology tax, it goes to NITDA. So you have some agencies.
Even a sugar development.
Yes, there's sugar development levy of 5%. It goes to sugar development, council, right? So you have some organizations like that you say for some specific reasons, you need them to carry out some assignments. So you give them some money like that, right? So
is there any oversight?
There should be, but do we have enough oversight is a different thing. So that's the second category. The third category are agencies that generate some revenue through fines, through levies, and all of that, right? And they see that as internally generated revenue.
Like Federal Road Safety?
Federal Road Safety. So many agencies generate, like JAM, for example.
Yes.
NCC, for example. Others like that they charge some kind of fees, right? So there's some kind of guideline around that. And recently also, the Ministry of Finance issued a circular because this has been an area of abuse. You know, we have a particular law that says that when you generate money, internally generated revenue, you should spend whatever it's left after your expenses is considered operational surplus, right? And that operational surplus, you should take 20. You shouldn't take more than 20% of it, and should remit the remaining 80% to the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the Federation, right? So, but do people, do organizations abide by that? Not necessarily. So there's a finance circular that says, okay, your internally generated revenue, 50% of it, automatically you must remit to federal government.
That's the new circular by the Federal Ministry
of Finance.
Which is somewhat
which is good, is a good step in the right direction, but that also begs certain questions. The first question is that, you know, okay, you say they should remit 50%. So how do we ascertain whether the 50% that they are keeping...
the actual 50%?
That is one. Then the 50% that they are keeping, how do we ascertain that that is what they need? Do they need more? Do they need less? Then, more importantly, how do we ensure that they are spending this money judiciously? How do we ensure that they are spending this money prudently? Right? Because the kind of money, and I'll give you a few examples. You see, when you allow... Based on the essay that I wrote, you know, there are some problems with this kind of thing. What we try to do is to solve some problems. We want to ensure that these agencies will have the incentive to do their work very well. These agencies will have predictable and regular funding, so that, you know, they won't be hamstrung, right? But what you have, in trying to solve that problem, you have also created some other problems.
There's room for a lot of abuse.
Yes.
Like the example you even gave, I think, in the essay, the second part, about the NEITI. Not spending the money on its primary duty.
So let's look at the one of NSITF.
Yes.
How does NSITF get money, for example? NSITF, there's a portion that companies and some government agencies contribute to NSITF. The idea is a form of social insurance to provide relief to workers who sustain injuries, right, while they are working, or to their relatives in case they are deceased, in case they are late. That was the idea, right? NSITF in 2024 will get 83 billion. And out of that, NSITF is only going to spend 8 billion, about 10%, on the claims of the workers.
And the rest
Meanwhile,
is going to be...
the NSITF will spend 25 billion, right, on the personnel of his own staff.
And how many people are we talking about?
Well, sometimes it's difficult to have that because you don't have, you know...
but they wouldn't be more than
no matter
a few hundreds
no matter the number of the organizations, right? You know, the number of staff in the organizations, you should be asking yourself, what is the purpose of this organization? Right? This organization was set up to provide relief to workers. So why are you spending most of the money on the staff? They're going to spend another 8 billion, right, for promotion, for recruitment. About the same amount they're going to spend on claims. Right? Another thing also is this. We also need to look at some of the way we think about some of these organizations. What was the purpose of setting up NSITF? Right? To provide succor to people who might have been injured. That is what employers are contributing money for NSITF for.
And it's been misapplied.
And, you know, there are two issues with that. The first one is that NSITF is spending a lot of this money to take care of itself. The second part is that we are thinking of NSITF as a revenue-generating agency.
And even before that, why is it that a lot of the times you see that NSITF is in the news because of some embezzlement? I mean, I can't even count the number of chief executives that had to be sacked over
it's very
because
easy.
There's so much money around.
So much money, so little oversight. Yes, you asked a question about oversight. Yes, there should be a supervisory ministry. There should be the National Assembly, right? But you know what happens?
Shakedowns, probably.
These people also know that they know where the money is. So they know, they choose who they appoint there, and they also choose, how they relate to them. As you know, I used to head a particular government agency. Most of these places are the darlings of the people that should be oversighting them. Because these are the places where they can get people employed. These are the places where they will be settled. These are the places where they can get contracts. These are the places where... But it's at a cost at many levels.
Very big cost, but I would like us to pause there and go for a short break and then resume the conversation shortly thereafter. Welcome back. It is 30 Minutes, the interactive program of Trust Television, and our guest today is Malam Waziri Adio, the Chief Executive of Agora Policy Think Tank, former Chief Executive of NEITI. Before we went on the break, we were dwelling on the NEITI that appears to be doing something other than its job, that is in terms of application of money. And then the oversight appears to also be weak or compromised because maybe the National Assembly is interested in something else other than ensuring that the money is well applied. How do we overcome the challenges that you've identified?
Okay, the first thing is that when you take an organization from having little money to all of a sudden having so much money, the logical step, especially when you don't put proper guardrails around things, the logical step is that they're going to behave like people who just win a jackpot. Let me give you an example. There's an organization called NASENI. In 2021, the budget of NASENI was 4 billion. By some things that we did to their law, right? NASENI,
some amendment
to the law. Because NASENI is going to get 1% of something that the federal government gets from the federation account, right? NASENI is going to get 130 billion this year. How do you move from 4.4 billion to 130 billion within 3 years? Right. So when you are suddenly suffused with money and you don't put proper checks around how the money is going to be spent, right? Ordinarily, what should be happening is not just that, okay, because you have money, you have to spend it. No. It should be based on needs, and there should be layers of oversight. FRS, for example, in 2021, the total budget for FRS was 171 billion. 171. The same FRS in 2024, we spent 356 billion. And guess what? In 2024, FRS will spend 171 billion on personnel alone.
Personnel alone? That's just the staff.
Personnel alone. That same organization will spend, apart from the personnel, is going to spend 11 billion on long service awards. That is probably the whole budget of a big university, maybe like University of Lagos. That same organization will spend 13 billion on what they call welfare packages, right? And it's not peculiar to FRS. If you go to an agency like NUPRC will spend 19.5 billion to build corporate headquarters. But it's not just that. NUPRC will spend 50 billion on welfare packages.
Who is getting these big welfare packages? Is it their staff or members of the National Assembly or some people in the presidency?
I don't know. But the thing is that, right, possibly this has been going on forever, but we didn't have the information. Right?
It's only now
that this has been disclosed for the first time, it's imperative on us in the media, in the civil society, in the academia, in the think tanks, in development cycles, the public financial management experts and others to start looking at these documents, to start asking questions. But if they throw this document there and nobody is looking at it, nobody is asking questions, how will things change?
I remember when Professor Oloyede, the current chief executive of JAMB, was appointed, he was the first to to start returning money back to the coffers of the federal government because before him, the chief executives were in cahoot with staff there, and maybe they just share the money. And it is no surprising that some of the former chief executives of the same institutions have been facing trial and are probably getting jail.
When an institution is awash with money, and there are no proper checks and balances, right? And I'm not saying they are stealing the money, by the way. We're talking about application of the yes,
that are not
and whether there are better ways, we don't have better ways of spending the same money, especially given the challenge that we have. We have kids that cannot go to school. Exactly. We have roads that are not motorable, right? We have infrastructure that are broken down. So why do we want an agency to spend 19 billion to build its corporate headquarters? Imagine what 19 billion can do. Why do you want to sequester 71 billion for some nebulous stuff that you didn't even deem right to mention in your budget, right? We're talking of billions here, right?
What about the equity bit of it?
Yeah.
How come states that have a population of 2 million, maybe even 20 million, they are getting less than 200 billion, and then one agency whose total staff strength may not be up to 10,000.
Let me tell you, there's a particular
equity.
There's a particular, you asked about the staff strength, right? And I said sometimes it's difficult to know the staff strength. There's a particular agency that I know the staff strength. And why? Because they published their annual report, not audited financial report, their annual report, and they mentioned the number of staff that they have. This organization has 939 staff as at 2021, right? And in 2021, they spent 43 billion on salaries. That's the kind of salary that people, even in the private sector, do not earn. Right? So there are many questions to be asked. We're not saying that some agencies should not be well provided for. We're not saying some of their staff should not be well taken care of because of the kind of job that they do. But, we need to ask questions. Are there other ways of managing public resources? Because at the end of the day, we're talking about public resources now, and we're talking about opportunity cost. We're talking about needs and the reality of, look at what is going on in this country. Why should it be the priority of anybody to spend 19 billion to build the corporate headquarters of an agency? And you know what? There are even some of these agencies that Nigerians do not know what they do.
That they exist, yes.
You have agencies like Space Agency, right? Getting like 24 billion. You have Agency for Nuclear Regulation getting 24 billion. You have Raw Material something getting 20-something billion. And you're just saying, are we getting value for money? You're not saying these agencies are not important, but given the quantum of money you are throwing these agencies, if you do a cost-benefit analysis, can you get more impact for spending that quantum of money in other areas? My answer is yes. So you ask about, so what are the things that we need to do, right? The first thing is that some of these agencies, the way they generate resources, the way they generate internally generated revenue, impose cost. Do you know that any ticket that you buy in Nigeria, whether domestic or international, 5% of that is a levy that is shared by aviation-related
and
agencies.
For all their inefficiency of the airports not functioning well, they still take part of it.
So they take that 5%. What does that 5% do to you? It increases the cost of buying ticket. And maybe you say, okay, maybe there are some agencies that you need to earmark some money for them. But that earmark, what should it be for? Should it be for them to run their operations, or should it be for specific infrastructure? For example, one of the things we might need to do is to say, okay, we know that there's education tax fund, 2%, that companies pay, and it goes to tech fund.
Yes.
Right. So if you have, some 7% port levy, for example, do you want to ring-fence it and say, okay, this should go to development of new ports? We should open up ports in other parts of the country. Don't use that to pay yourself. Don't use that to do welfare packages and all of those things.
But what about the temptation also to pursue, because some of the agencies are supposed to be regulatory.
Yeah.
And then probably their attention will be more towards revenue generation.
Absolutely.
And then regulatory
that's also something that is we create perverse incentive, right? Whatever is measured, whatever is celebrated, is what people will focus on. Look at custom, for example. Anytime that custom talks about, what do they talk about?
Budget.
Whereas part of the responsibility of customs is to protect our borders, part of their responsibility is to ensure trade facilitation. But since you are not measuring that, since you are measuring their contribution to federational account, and since they also have an incentive to get a portion of that, that is what they are concentrating on, at the expense of some other things, right? Look at, there's a government agency, Federal Competition and Consumer Protection, Commission.
I was surprised recently. I saw them talking about the money they are generating.
They said they generated 56 billion in a year, right? And how did they do that? They impose fine. So when you encourage a regulator to be fending for itself, what do you think it will do? It will be looking for opportunity to maximize, the fines.
And make it even more difficult for businesses to operate.
So what you need to do, that doesn't mean that businesses should not be held in check, but we need to decouple regulation from revenue generation. If we think the functions that they're carrying out are very important enough, we should provide for them. We should provide adequately for them. But don't ask them to go and be bringing money for the federation, because you're going to create conflict of interest. You're going to create perverse incentives. And at the end of the day, you're going to ease the consumers. Any cost that you impose on businesses will pass to consumers. So that will affect the welfare of consumers. It will also affect the cost of doing business in Nigeria. At the end of the day, we are shooting ourselves in the foot. So my own proposal will be for the ones collecting 4% or 7% cost of collection. It cannot be a fixed figure, because in some years, that 4% or 7% might not be enough. In some years, you are giving them way too much, which will open them up for corruption, for patronage, for pressure, for instability and all of that, which they don't need. So what you should do is to make sure that you can reduce the percentage, right? So if you collected, FRS collected 171 billion in 2011, so why should it go to 356 now? Why can't it be, okay, maybe there will be an annual increase of like 10% or 20%, but not more than 100%. Right?
Very, important point there, but I think we've run out of time.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Waziri Adio, for coming on this program. It's always a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much. Thank you. My pleasure.
Viewers, that's the end of this edition of 30 Minutes. Keep a date with us.